talk and then us in front of you talk. I know that there's K through 12, there's coaches, a lot of coaches, shop teachers maybe, possibly. So we tried to gear our presentation with that in mind. We weren't just thinking on elementary level, but all the way up, and making sure that we were gonna address all of your grade bands in our presentation. We're just gonna kind of familiarize you with some general information about the differences in Common Core writing instruction and compared with the writing instruction that we have been doing in Tennessee prior to now, because it's very different, and that's why we need every teacher to teach writing in all their subject areas, whether you teach math, science, social studies, history, anything. We need every teacher doing writing. So we're just going to familiarize you with some of the challenges that we'll face, some insights as to why these shifts, particularly in writing and vocabulary, will improve student learning overall, and some strategies that can be used for you to implement effective writing instruction that includes all the components of these shifts in the ELA Common Core. We all know that the essential qualities that distinguish exceptional teachers from good teachers are these up here. The teacher is the thing that makes a difference. It's not a program that you have or a technology that you have or anything. You are the one that makes the difference in the classroom. If we have accountability for outcomes, knowledge of your subject area, communication skills, and interest in your students, respect for your students, and a positive disposition, you will be the thing that makes the difference in that classroom. So if you approach this writing with a positive attitude, the students will probably respond to it in a much better way. This is just a quote about the most important factor affecting student learning is the teacher. And having worked for Mr. Chandler for 5 years, this is something that he told us every day. The most important factor affecting student learning is the teacher. The immediate and clear implication of this finding is that seemingly more can be done to improve education by improving the effectiveness of teachers than by any other single factor. So the better that we are at our craft of teaching, the better the student's outcome is going to be. And sometimes I know we feel like it's a program or we don't have the resources to do something, but you are the one that makes the difference in that classroom. What you do and how you teach makes the most difference. This is just a short clip about why we need the Common Core so desperately.
It's playing twice, you have 2 tabs up. It's on the Google.
It's on the Google. Google Chrome. Get one of them. Are we going to sign in sheets?
It's in. I'll have one. Because there'll be one at the end.
Thank you. I really hope to get a job here.
Well, let's get started with your interview.
You know, it's like when you pass around all the years.
No.
Yes, you're right.
What are my answer choices?
What do you mean?
My answer choices. You know, A, B, C, or E.
There are not any answer choices.
Oh, I understand. In that case, I choose C.
You choose C.
Yes, I choose C. My 5th grade teacher told me to always choose C when I did not know the answer.
Oh, it sounds like your 5th grade teacher really prepared you for your future. Moving on. This job will require you to write proposals about energy conservation. Are you a strong writer?
Yes, my teachers always told me that I write very good stories. I also like to write poetry.
Well, we will not need you to write poetry or stories. We will need you to write proposals regarding energy conservation.
Proposals. Is that like writing a persuasive essay?
Sure.
In that case, yes. I am very good at writing proposals. Every year in school, my teachers made me write a proposal regarding school uniform policies. I also wrote some proposals about banning cell phones in school. Would you like to read them?
No, I would not like to read them. If you get a job here, you will need to write proposals about energy conservation. Your proposals will need to include basic mathematical equations as well as scientific research.
Wait,
What is wrong?
I am confused.
That is not very surprising.
You said I would have to include mathematical equations and scientific research in my writing,
Yes, that is what I said.
but that doesn't make sense.
What doesn't make sense?
Math, science, and writing. They are separate subjects. I don't know if I can incorporate math and science into my writing. They are all very different.
Well, if you work here, that is what you will have to do.
This job seems very difficult. I do not think my public education prepared me to work here.
Well, I have to agree with you. I have one more question for you, though. Why did you think you were ever qualified to work here in the first place? Why are you looking around?
You asked me a question, and I do not know the answer. So, I am looking for someone to think, pair, share with.
There is no one for you to think their share with.
Oh. In that case, I choose C.
I think I've heard enough. Thank you for coming.
Okay, I hope you could hear that, because it's been over dramatized, but it's really the way students sometimes, once they graduate from high school, are prepared to answer questions that ask them to think for themselves. One of the key shifts in the Common Core curriculum is in the reading, and I think we've all heard it, but it's the balance of nonfiction and fiction. And that's the percentage that they're asking us to present in our classroom, and look at the high schools. One of the challenges I think that we're all facing is finding more nonfiction material. We're having to get very creative in our social studies and science, and bring in articles so that the children can read them for their material that we do not have. The questions on the park assessment will not be similar to the questions on TCAP. They're going to be very different, not only in their content, but also in their format. They're going to have questions where students have to do something, like write an essay, create a model, or draw a graph. They'll also have some multiple choice, but it may not be from 4 choices. It may be from 8 choices, and there may be 3 or more correct answers. And then there are some where they have to just provide an open-ended answer and write the answer in. There's also interacting with technology, where you drag items and drop them into their correct place. For example, on a number line, they're having to place fractions on a number line correctly, or divide a number line into sections of 2/6 on a number line. And they have to physically drag those items and place them there. That's one way that the whole test overall will be different. These are some examples of those tests. This is a drag and drop from the third grade test, where on TCAP, we would normally see something where they just would fill in one of these blanks. Here, they have to drag all of these items from here into the correct position. So it's not anymore just, they're not able to just eliminate, okay, I know that the pupa is the one thing that's missing, and then choose that answer. They have to physically drag these words over here into the right spot. And there are some samples here for the different grade levels. And so you can see some of the drag and drop items, you can see some of the open response items. This is a 10th grade keyboarding, which is what they call the writing one. They have to use what you learned from reading Daedalus and Icarus by Ovid, and To a Friend Whose Work Has Come to Triumph by Anne Sexton, to write an essay that provides an analysis of how Sexton transforms Daedalus and Icarus. As a starting point, you may want to consider what is emphasized, absent, or different in the two texts, but feel free to develop your own focus or analysis. Develop your essay by providing textual evidence from both texts. Be sure to follow the conventions of standard English. That's a 10th grade sample prompt. I don't know about y'all, but that's far different than what we have been seeing before now. That website is included on your resource sheet in here, I think, and if not, then I will email it out to Mr. Campbell, so you can place it on the website. You can go back and look there.
After looking at the questions and the prompts that the children are going to be writing to, you can see how important it is for us to be prepared. On this side, on the left-hand side, there's questions that we had before the Common Core, and on the other side, questions after. The first section would be elementary, the middle section would be middle school, and the last section would be high school. And you can see how much more analytical they are after the core, and how you have to always bring the children back to the text to read it closely and re-examine. They have to be able to think through what they're reading and make lots of inferences.
But on all of these questions up here, number one, Casey at the back, I'm pretty much guessing is going to be on Parks, because Casey at the back is used in every single grade band for different questioning, and all of the written pieces on Park will have been previously published. They will no longer use pieces that are written specifically for the text. So the more text your students read, the more likely it is that they'll see those same texts on the assessment. Casey at the back question, all these on the left will involve students telling about what they feel, or what they value, or what they think about something. It does not require them to go back into the text and decide what the author thinks, or the author was trying to convince you of by writing that piece. And that's the major difference. So you may still be able to use some of your old resources, but rewrite the questions, because the questions I know in our current reading series are much more non-text dependent than they are text dependent. But you can still use that piece of literature and just rewrite your questions to be text dependent. All of the passages on the literacy parts will come from authentic texts. every single one. So every poem that you read, there's a possibility that could be the one on there. They could come from a highlights magazine, they could come from a government document, the Constitution, could come from any sort of textbook. They can use excerpts, but they will not write any pieces original for the test. The selective response questions will focus on reading and vocabulary. They'll have to be able to provide evidence for their answer, and the vocabulary questions will focus on the meaning as it's presented in the text. Most of the words are all multiple meaning words, so it's going to be important that you take your kids to the text to identify what a word means based on how it's used in the passage, not just what they think that that word means, because that's not always going to be, it's not always going to be the most common meaning.
We see that writing is the most neglected R, and one of the reasons for that may be that we have tested writing in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade in the past, but every grade will be assessed on writing now. So we all need to be writing in all of our classes.
I know that when I taught 4th grade, we were not assessed in writing, and I probably was not very good about making sure that they did a whole lot of writing because it wasn't tested in my grade. I taught them to write, but I didn't worry about it near as much as I worried about teaching the standards that I was tested on. But in, like I said, the whole entire test is going to have writing response for every grade, K to 12. So if you don't teach them how to write well, they're not going to be able to pass their test, even just for what we're used to as our assessment for the content knowledge, because they have to write about it. This one just says, the writing process is how we translate ideas into written text. And we found this quote, don't get it right, get it written. And I thought that was really good because it's not about just getting it right on the test. If they can write about it, whatever your topic is, if it's shop, if it's government, if it's history, if it's math, if they can write about it, it's the same thing like we used to tell, if you could teach it to a friend and you know it, well, writing it is just the form of teaching it to somebody else. If they can write about it, they will get it right on the test. So instead of worrying about whether or not they can choose the answer, have them write in every class.
Why we learn from writing, when students are capable of writing about a topic in their own words and add it to their knowledge, prior knowledge and experience, they are able to achieve the highest level of thinking. So when we're writing, it's helping children learn how to think through the process. And one of our slides, and I think we passed through it, was talking about why it's important for everyone to write, even coaches. We saw a lot of coaches coming in. I don't know if you write why football's more important than basketball or baseball's more important to whatever you can write about. Have them write those plays down because there's going to be a shift in the technical part of the writing. Directions, telling how to do something. And we're all in the trenches together and we support each other because all of the questions will be written based on the largest percentage of them will be writing. So, whatever you can do in whatever area you teach to have children write is what we're going to have for all of us to be successful.
But these are just some statements. We'll do these and just turn and talk with somebody near you to discuss which of these describes the Common Core writing framework. Which of these statements? There's 4 statements that describe the Common Core writing framework. You can think, pair, share if you choose to do that, but we're not actually taking a test for it. We are not
Well, see you too.
Okay, she said that one, which is greater emphasis on sentences of information and critical essays, describes the Common Core writing framework, and that is correct. 4, writing closely integrated with reading comprehension instruction, that describes the Common Core framework for writing. 5, the amount of writing about what students read increases, that is correct. 7, greater emphasis on the use of evidence in writing. And 8, major emphasis is writing about the ideas in text. So she was correct. Tell me your name. Gina from
West Middle.
From West Middle. Gina from West Middle. Got that right. And she got a bowl of pink.
All right, writing instructions gets a makeover. I heard someone say today, and it really stuck with me, that the average American reads one book a year, that the average the CEOs of America read 5 books a month. Okay, so that speaks volumes. If reading is going to be integrated into writing, I'm sure that we would have some of the same things that we could say about writing. If you look up at the before and after, writing and reading are integrated. Writing instructions required with specific standards. Look at the different types of writing. I mean, it was enough when we had to do just the narrative in middle school, but now to include all of the other types of writing, we need to be writing every day, maybe short answers and essays, and at least once a week to one type of writing that we see on the projector. There is a model, and this spoke volumes to me. It is on the Parks website. It's the IFL framework. It has it for each grade level, and they call it modules, first, second, third, and fourth module, which relates to that grading period, and they have it laid out, you know, the different types of reading, the different types of writing.
It gives you a guide of exactly how many times they should write informative and explanatory and opinion pieces each 9 weeks, so that you can kind of have it planned out and you know, okay, this is how many times I need to have the kids publishing this, because there is a much higher push on the persuasive and argumentative writing in the high school, but all of the grades have to do all the types, and so it tells you which ones to focus on and how often to teach them and how often to assess kids on that writing. And so that's just a good resource to go there and kind of give yourself a guide of, okay, this is how many times I need to be teaching this, and this is the way that I need to be teaching it. Because in elementary school, all we've ever done is narrative. And so many of the teachers and the students got really good at doing narrative writing. And our scores went up as we learned it. But this time we're talking about 3 different types that all have 3 different forms, that have different vocabulary that you need to use in there and different style that you need to use in there. So it's going to be very important that we have every person across the curriculum writing in these different ways. They don't have to just write a narrative in the lower grade. They have to write in all of them all the way across.
And these look like units of study to me. And I would predict that's the route we're going to go, units of studies and themes. But they also will be selling their units on IFL in the future, is what my understanding is. And, you know, if you just had enough to model to get us started, when we, you know, it feels overwhelming to see it all, but when it's broken down, it's not so bad.
The 10 course slide has some samples on it and they're lined up with these gray bands here. In pre-K through 2, the written response is just information to informational text through group activities with prompting and support. That's big words, and many of my teachers at my school say, well, what does that mean with prompting and support? How much support? What, how am I supposed to help them, but not help them too much and have them do it? Well, it doesn't say, but you definitely need to have them writing as much as possible on their own. But in pre-K through 2, they need some adult prompting. They may need sentence frames. They may need you to write what they're saying, because they may not be able to physically write the actual words that they are, but they can think that high level. And many times, primary teachers don't put high vocabulary in front of their students because they think, oh, well, they can't write that. That doesn't matter. They can still think it and say it and include it in their writing, even if it's not spelled correct. In 3 through 8, they do written analysis of informational texts, where they're given 2 to 3 texts, and they have to write an opinion piece or an argument-based analysis of informational text. One of the 3rd grade samples is 2 articles about Native Americans, and they have to read the 2 articles, and then the prompt says something like, write a narrative as if you were a Native American, tell about your day, include dialogue, include vivid language, and correct grammar. That's just the prompt for a 3rd grade. And I know in Jackson-Mason County 3rd grade, our reading scores are not, 3rd grade all the time, 3rd grade, and that's their writing prompt. Now, that's a high level. I put that in front of some people in the community that are not teachers. And I said, what grade do you think this is for? They said, 6th, 7th? No, it's 3rd. And they couldn't believe that was what they were wanting a 3rd grader to write. So it's going to be very important as you teach your kids what they need to write, and as you model this writing for them, that you educate parents and the community about what is expected of our students, so that they understand and maybe they can get a better picture and they may be able to help their child. In 9-12, they have to write opinion or argument-based analysis of informational text. The same thing, more often 3 different texts, 3 different styles of text by 3 different authors. And they have to include the author's perspective in theirs, as well as dialogue, and back it up with evidence from the text. Argumentation, to me, in my mind, was persuasion, but I was wrong. So we went on to read about how argumentation is not the same thing as persuasion. When you try to persuade someone to do something, you only include your opinion and what you really want. And it's a lot of your thoughts and feelings, like that old type of writing. But according to the Common Core, argumentation must have evidence from the text, and it's as if you treat every text that you read as if it is argumentative, and that the author wrote it for the purpose of persuading you to do something or arguing for something or someone. When I first read that, I was very confused, because about every piece is not argumentative, every piece is not persuasive. However, when you read a biography of someone, often, if it's not an autobiography, the author does have a lot of wording in there to either convince you to really think this person is great, or to convince you otherwise. And so you were to teach kids to approach the text as if everything is not a form of neutral information, but rather that critical reading would take center stage, and we would be looking at what is the author trying to tell us or make us think or believe by writing this piece. There'll be some things that we have to change to meet these expectations. You'll have to teach your students to discern the arguments underlying in that text. The need for greater emphasis on trying to figure out the author's perspective, their tone, and their position. So instead of just asking them author's purpose, and I'm sure Chandler saw about 1 million author's purpose lessons every single time we do evaluation in it. I know in elementary school we I'm doing author's purpose because that's easy to teach and it's easy to see and it's easy to assess. But if we change it to author's perspective and author's viewpoint from any piece, not just is it to entertain, persuade, or inform, but what was the author specifically trying to persuade us to think? Or what was the author trying to inform us about? Not just what was the author's purpose, but what was the author's perspective? And what is the underlying argument that's here that we're not just seeing in the writing, but we have to really read between the lines and make inferences about what the author believes, thinks, or wants us to know based on the piece that they write.
And that's for every informational text?
Every informational text. And that's according to the Common Core. Yes.
My question is, I'm an English teacher at Southside, and I've already started moving some of my stuff toward Common Core. Are we gonna get some type of, I don't wanna get ahead of you, but rubric or anything that's gonna talk about how they're actually gonna score this writing? And being an English teacher, I have 11th grade, we work on writing quite a bit. But what I'm struggling with Common Core is when they're actually going to be doing the PARCC assessment, we don't have anything telling us exactly how it's going to be scored. What's content, what's mechanics, are each part of those scored higher than the others? So, we're trying to find people to ask, and I met with my assistant principal yesterday, and we were kind of going back and forth. We're all trying to get information. So I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you in this, but as we're going through this, that is what keeps coming to my mind is how are these going to be scored?
Right, and that's very important. The PARCC website does have rubrics posted as
Okay.
to how they will score those. The 10-4 website has rubrics posted as well. If you don't get on the 10-4 website regularly, you should, because I get on there every day just to see. But they update, and PARCC actually has the rubrics for you to print for every grade level.
Okay.
So you should be able to use those now. As far as how much each section is weighted,
Mhm.
the last ones I saw did not have that on there, but they did have what they were looking for in each section.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
And also, the state has in their plans to roll out a web portal called MIST. You may have heard of it. I don't know if all of you have heard of it, where there will be sample writings. There will be, you'll be able to see what quality papers look like versus what non-quality papers look like. It was actually supposed to come online sometime in November. Obviously, it hasn't come out yet, but sometimes the state, when they say November or October, it'll be usually November the 31st at midnight. So look for that to come out soon, and when that does, that information will be pushed out to your schools. It's called the MIST portal, M-I-S-T.
Okay, thank you.
And that will be where they can go into the computer lab,
Okay.
and it'll give them a prompt and they can write to it.
Right,
Okay.
on the keyboard.
Yeah, but it will not score it for you. It'll still be, you have to use those rubrics.
Okay, that's fine.
So at least they're having some sample practice
Yeah.
with prompts that are aligned to this.
But places on the website where it says, do you have questions, that's a good thing to ask, break it down for them.
Okay.
Writing is,
This goes back to writing is something that we're all going to be teaching. It's going to be integrated into all content areas, writing across the curriculum. Writing will be 65 or 60% of the assessment. 60%. So this is probably the biggest shift we have seen in Common Core in writing. That's across the whole test. So that's why it's important, no matter what we teach or what we're doing, to incorporate writing on a regular basis. Even if we do not feel comfortable with it, we have to just put one foot in front of the other and start digging in. And it's going to, like I said, when these lower grades start progressing up, we're all going to benefit from it, having written more often.
I went to a school today in the gym. There were 25 clipboards laid out on the ground with index cards on them and an essential question from the lesson that day in PE. And every student had to write an answer. So it doesn't have to be that you as the PE teacher or you as the shop teacher or you as the home ec teacher teaches them all the writing. But we need you to incorporate writing into everyday instruction because it has to be part of what they do all the time. Otherwise, they won't get any better at writing.
Okay, my second, okay? But you can see here the 60% will be shipping involving writing. And those will be short answers, those will be essays, those will be thinking type questions that we have modeled all year long, hopefully, so that when they get to the assessment, they'll feel comfortable. This is a biggie, that there's no grammar in isolation. But I don't think we really had grammar in isolation in a long while. But it's going to be more so in the contents of what the child is writing. That's how they will assess the grammar and sentence construction. It doesn't mean that we're not gonna teach grammar, but that's how it will be tested and evaluated.
It's gonna be really important that they know to write with correct grammar, and there's a big push with speaking with correct grammar for a formal language and then informal language, and teaching students the difference in formal and informal language and the appropriate times to use those types of language. With no questions with them in isolation, that means that if you teach them only where they answer multiple choice questions or only where they diagram sentences, then they're not gonna be able to put it into practice. You may still use those things, but you need to be scoring their grammar within their writing as well.
DOL, the daily oral language would be great for that.
You just have to take really small steps. We're not gonna be able to accomplish this overnight. I mean, you're talking about going from writing only 3 times from K to 12, and it was all very specific, and one type of writing was taught, to 60% of the assessment is in the form of writing, whether it's a short answer or an essay, it's 60% of the assessment. So that's really scary. And, sometimes I think there's no way we can do it, but we can if you just take small steps. And one of the small steps can be vocabulary. If you think about what is the difference in a student that can read in 3rd grade and that can't, and in high school, why do we get kids that go all the way to high school and can't read? More than likely because of vocabulary. The difference in vocabulary. If they are not exposed to a rich vocabulary from the time they're little all the way up, they don't read near as well as a child that is exposed to rich vocabulary often and from the time they're very small. So even if you can't teach all the writing right now, you can start with changing your vocabulary in the classroom, using every single piece that your students read to pull out rich vocabulary. Make them use vivid words in their vocabulary. Have a word of the day, have a word of the week, have some sort of words where they're writing better. The example is people do a lot of things. You could say that. Or better, you could say people perform a lot of tasks. It's just richer language, and we have to teach it to them because they don't come knowing that. And so if you teach them to say gallop instead of run, or if you teach them to say thrilled instead of happy, that's part of writing because they will begin to use those words in their writing and they will become better writers. Vocabulary, language, and writing and conversation combine as our primary tools of communication. Teaching vocabulary in an integrated manner requires a superhuman effort. That's why we need everybody in the whole group to do it. Even if we have a word of the week at our school, and the principal and the guidance counselor and myself, we carry around tickets in our pocket. And this year we have superhero themes, so they are super wow words. And we can stop a student at any time and say, hey, what's our word of the week? And kindergartners that are 5 that came to school and the teachers were saying they can't even write their name, they can't do it. They know our word of the week. And last week it was compare and contrast. And when I stopped that 5-year-old and said, what's our word of the week? Compare and contrast. Compare means how are they the same, and contrast means how are they different. Because they hear it every day. And they do it over and over again, and we say it, and it's up in the hall, and the teachers go over it in the classroom. So the more they hear it, they get it. It doesn't have to be that it's a huge lesson. It's just a small thing that you can incorporate to change overall learning. Shades of meaning is another baby step that you can take. If this is your vocabulary word for the week, tepid, and you're trying to teach that word, I thought this was really neat. They just put them on a line, and they say it's comparable to a number line, but it's just a word line. And you put your keyword on there, and then you put up 2 antonyms that they already know for the ends of the line. And then you show them where that middle word goes. Now they're able to identify, okay, hot is extreme, cold is extreme, tepid is in the middle of that. Are there any other words we could add to this line? Warm is in between hot and tepid. Chilly is in between tepid and cold. That didn't take very long, and it wouldn't take very long to add it to your vocabulary lesson each week, but it would change their vocabulary over time, and their vocabulary in writing and their vocabulary in speaking. Just look back at your anticipation guide and see if you think each of these items is true or false, and we're just going to go over there very says writing instruction is most effective when introduced once students are competent readers after the primary grades. Is that true or false? False. We need to be writing in pre-K. They need to be writing at home. I'm doing a big push at our school, getting out into the community, bringing the community in, and giving them resources to use in their homes so that kids are writing and being exposed to reading at home before they ever come to school. Students should write in all subject areas on a regular basis. True. Writing format tools such as Foursquare, Race, Raft, ACE can improve student writing when implemented regularly. True. If you use any of those, Race, Raft, ACE, if you don't know what any of those are, Foursquare, those are just supports to help students write. We use Race at my school, and we use Race every day. Because if you use it every day, over time, they get used to that. That's just making them restate, it's making them go back into the text, cite evidence, and explain. And so you can use any of those, but if you don't have a support that you use, you need to find one, and if you use it across the school, we use ours K-5. So every teacher uses that model, and so that's how it helps to get better. Rather than jumping around in grades, we just use one all the way. The terms argumentation and persuasion can be used interchangeably within the Common Core state standards. False. Persuasion is only a part of argumentation. Argumentation has to have text evidence. 60% of the PARC assessment will involve writing. How many of you put false when you first came in? Anybody put false when you first came in? Did everybody know it was going to be 60%? Because I didn't know it was going to be 60%. Proficient readers are better writers. Proficient readers are better writers. True. They are better writers. Students must master basic grammar skills before they can learn to write. False. You can, they don't have to know all their basic grammar skills before they can learn to write. If they can imagine, then they can write. If you got 100, you can do it. Yes, you can. Thank you all for coming. I know that this is not your favorite thing to do. It's not mine either. We got to help our kids.
Okay, before you leave, thank you as always. We'll have the sign-in sheets on the table. Y'all probably know this better than I do. I don't think there's one of these scheduled for December. Correct? The next one is January, so make sure you check your calendars. Remember that website, that's where you can find new teacher information, so if you change anything, that's where it'll be. Thank you for coming. Have a great
It's about time for me to do some surprise about in your grade. Because they just don't turn in. Right. Right.
Yeah, I know one line.